This is the Right Now podcast with Sarah Werner. Episode 145, Collaborative Storytelling with Erik and Dan. Welcome to Right Now, the podcast that helps all writers, aspiring professional and otherwise, to find the time, energy, and courage you need to pursue your passion and write. Today, I have with me two wonderful guests. I suppose that I should also say, hi, I'm your host, Sarah Werner. And now I can say hello today. I have two wonderful guests. I have with me today via virtual studio, Dan and Erik. So Dan Lovley and Erik Saras from Marsfall, which you may be familiar with. Marsfall launched around the same time that my own audio drama Girl in Space did years ago, and we have just been wonderful, good, close friends ever since. So welcome to the show, Dan and Erik.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
It's great to see our space buddy again.
I know, space friends. Oh, I love it. Well, I want to just start things off by asking, I wrote Girl in Space in a vacuum. I wrote it essentially in space, all alone on a ship, aka my office, by myself. But you guys took a collaborative approach to crafting your story. I would love to hear more about that process and how you kind of grew your team, and anything you can tell me about what it looked like putting that together.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like it's taken a lot of different forms, but Erik and I have kind of been working together, coming up with ideas and collaborating really since like early 2010s. Before that, it was just kind of like tossing ideas back and forth, but not really doing anything with them.
Not writing yet.
Yeah, no. Just ideas that we should have written down, and now, who knows, they're in the ether. But when we started writing, myself, Erik, and our other partner, Sam Bose-Miller, we were all in different states. We had lived pretty close together in New York for some time, but then when we decided, let's make a show, I moved to LA and Sam moved to Michigan and Erik moved to New Jersey. So we had to figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah.
And yeah, we found that essentially we would have longer calls where we would kind of brainstorm or come up with ideas. And I would say for a long time, our process was Erik and I specifically would build sort of an outline of what we wanted to write about, and then, choose a section of it that we wanted to focus on. We'd both go away for half an hour, write, come back, talk about what worked, talk about what didn't, and then sometimes switch. So I'd be looking at what Erik wrote and he'd be looking at what I wrote. In many ways, it was I felt more vulnerable doing that than I ever have with writing, because instantly I was getting feedback. Erik's my best friend, so his feedback is always helpful. But also, even if it's mean, I know it's got which I don't think it is, but it's coming from a good place. But that made a big difference, having someone who I trusted and whose voice I've been working with, putting together collaborations and silly projects and stuff really since high school.
I definitely think that's like still the core of our process too, and you nailed it, Dan. Like the trust that's there, and I think having known you since high school and us being best friends, there was a lot of trust, that feeling vulnerable, but like going to your best friend. I don't know. I think it allowed us both to improve our writing a lot faster too, because it was like having two minds tackling the exact same problem. What to do with the blank page. And coming from like a musical background for me, and Dan is really well versed in music too, a lot of our outlines we actually formed by exchanging music with each other and making playlists about characters, which I know is a common thing that writers do. But like we ended up kind of another story that isn't Marsfall. We kind of got the entire series outlined just through swapping classic rock and classical music and funk and chorus and all sorts of stuff back and forth and over the years. And so that's like the nice thing about having, I think, a writing partner that really gels with the same mindset as you. And then we've had to figure out how to standardize things as we've started to work with other people. And Dan mentioned Sam, who's one of our other partners, and then Brian Goodhart is our sound engineer and recently has been way more active in a creative producer role and like showrunner for our newest season. So yeah, starting with Dan, I think made it easier to branch out and add more people in for sure.
Oh, I love this. I have, boy, just this like branching creature of questions that I want to ask you. But I think I want to back up just a little bit. So, just for our listeners who might not be familiar with a writer's room and even terms like producer and showrunner, can you give us just a quick definition of sort of these terms that we've been using?
Yeah. I think like this is a great time to ask because I think I've really learned the difference this past 6 months while working on our newest season. So, writer, is the person who sits down, writes the actual script, will write the dialogue, set the scene. And if you have a co-writer like Dan and I, whether, one of us puts in 30 and our person puts in 70, whatever, it doesn't matter. We share 50-50 of the credit. So that's the job of the writers, the person to put the stuff on the page. Producer is a much kind of higher level, big picture thing. Like, they might have general ideas of where the story is going as a creative producer. It might also just be, keeping the books balanced, like checking the budget. Producer's kind of like a catch-all term. And, for all four of us, myself, Dan, Sam, and Brian as producers, like we'll do anything from the administration through like heavy story design and catch anything small or humongous that falls between the cracks. And so then showrunner, I found like sits really in between the two. Like I and, kind of Dan and myself had called each other showrunners for the first couple seasons, but now with season 4, we've hired at least 5 additional writers that we've been working with and maybe even expand even more. But like we've learned that with the showrunner, it's that producer half that's like organizing the emails, setting up the meetings, running the meetings, having an agenda, and then also that writer's half that is doing the really hardcore outlining so that a writer can have a good place to start from when they make their script. And then the final step of the showrunner is to collect everybody's scripts, issue notes, and we do a second draft, and when we get that second draft, it's out of the writer's hand. And then the showrunners, we don't, but like we might if we had to rewrite every single word of that script, but we don't get any of the credit. It's all about the writer who keeps the credit. And I think that's like a really, really important thing that I've seen from some showrunners that I really admire, that, even one casually was like, it's amazing seeing an episode of my show and knowing that I wrote most of the script, even though I have no writing credit. And someone was like, oh, that must feel so bad. And they're like, I got paid. Like, that's the job. Like, so, but yeah, I really feel very fortunate to be like a showrunner, but also that Dan and I still get to write some episodes as well. Cause it's nice to shut off all the other parts and just get into the page and write.
Absolutely. Dan, did you have anything to add? Because that was so succinct and so good.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I will add that I learned that I'm not super into show running, that I really love just sticking as an actor and a writer and producer. But I think that's something that we kind of figured out over the past 6 months, year or so, that Erik's really well positioned to take on that role. And I think we come from different mindsets. Like I approach writing from the perspective as of an actor. And so, part of what I'm looking at is this going to sound realistic? Is this going to work effectively to convey this character's progress in the story? Whereas, and I don't want to speak for Erik, but I feel like occasionally you might be coming at it from an angle more like, how is this going to overall affect the rest of this season and maybe next season? Whereas I'm just looking at more of a, I guess, like day to day, and you're more big picture, I would say.
Yeah, we're like co-managers. He handles the day to day. I handle the big picture. We're each doing half a job. But no, I mean, as we all know, in writing and podcasting, or most jobs in the United States, your job is like 3 jobs minimum.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Gosh, well, and it's funny because I was just about to ask, like, how does it feel to have your job so clear cut and parsed out and focused down to just one thing? But it sounds like no matter what you're doing, you're still doing all the things, kind of in a way.
And especially like with overlap of seasons and stuff, like I don't want to speak for you, Dan, but like pivoting between doing producer notes on our season that's about to air while trying to write the upcoming season, you can say you're switching the hat all you want, but like it is a very hard balance
It's a
to
trip.
maintain.
It is. How do you feel like this has affected your creativity? And I want to ask about this, well, in a couple different senses. But first of all, in the sense that, for me, being a creator is a huge part of my identity. And for me, my projects are all my little creative babies. And I think what I want to ask, and Erik, I know that you have a new baby, so maybe this is just not even the right metaphor, but I
Oh,
kind
I
of
know
want
where
to
this is
ask,
going.
like, how do you feel your sense of being a creator or creativity has changed in working together on projects?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
Erik, do you want to?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, for me, I feel as though this is something that has really helped me.
Mm.
Before working with Erik and before writing collaboratively, the biggest issue that I think I have faced is being 100% unwilling to kill my darlings. That I have all these great little ideas that like are perfect in my head, but don't work at all in a script, or maybe like they don't work the way I think. And now, in working with Erik and Sam and Brian, we're able to identify like that's a cool idea, makes no sense here. Save that for season 4. Save that for the next episode when we're going to focus on something different. So it helps. It's really helped me focus. I don't feel limited by that. I feel more like I'm able to cut the diamond a little bit more neatly, and make it shine a little bit better instead of having a giant rock that looks kind of gross and dirty. Now I have a slightly smaller but much more polished, beautiful gem.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And going back and forth, like when Dan was saying earlier, we pass the scripts back and forth, and as we get deeper and deeper into versions of a draft or something, I might cut something that he wrote, and then I'll get it back, and then he'll have put it back in, and I'll be like, okay, so he really wants this. Does it work? Like, and then I might cut it again, and then if it comes back and it's like in there, I'm like, all right, fine, and then like, or we'll similar things like that will happen, and then of course then we hand that off to like Sam, and immediately he's like, this is cut. Like, so you just have to get used to like, oh, I see where you guys did this, it's like really cool, but what does it do for the story? I'm like, I don't know, man, there's an explosion, like, can we just have the explosion?
Yeah, we really wanted that joke, but like it's just not funny enough, so we need to punch it up, or we need to get rid of it.
Wow.
Yep. And I think that is a critical part. Like, what's the phrase? It's like writing is just rewriting. I mean, that's what it all is. Like,
I learned so much from you just now, and I'm curious too. So I used to build websites for people and do marketing consulting and stuff. And one big question I always had to ask was, who ultimately is in charge of saying no?
yeah.
And is everybody else okay with this? And it sounds like that's something you've had to work through as well, especially with something so close to your heart.
Absolutely.
Taking a joke out, putting it back in, realizing it doesn't work. Is that the executive producer then that's in charge of kind of that ultimate decision? Or do you find that you have discussions about it?
I think probably discussions, because all 4 of us are equal stakeholders in our company. We're all equal executive producers. But like, I don't know, Dan. I don't know how to answer that question. How do we end up with a script that like we're all like, cool? I don't know how.
I feel like, sometimes, like you said, if I had a line that got cut, I might think like, oh, I wonder why that got cut, and I might throw it back in because I don't see an immediate reason why it's not in there. But if it comes back and like it's gone again, then we might talk about like, hey, like, was there something wrong with that, or was it just like we need to save time here, or whatever it is. But I found it's pretty amicable. I mean, we don't usually fight each other over.
We leave our
the
ego at the
minutia.
door.
Yeah, we kind of have to.
You have to do that, and like, and we always are like, what is the best thing for the story, and what is the most believable response or justification for a character or motivation? If you can't answer those 2 things and something feels wrong, then that's like, it needs to be adjusted or it needs to be removed. And now actually I do think, in the end, the person who really gets kind of the final say is the 4 of us when we're actually listening to the mixes and doing notes, because that's really the final step of like, you know what? I know we wrote this joke. I know we recorded this joke. I know the actors performed it well. It just ain't funny. Like, snip the joke. Or like, you know what? We actually need to rewrite this little bit of a scene because it's just not working. So that's the luxury of us, being able to go start to finish and just, over the years, just finding a way for the four of us to work together. Because like I'm in awe of you, Sarah, the fact that like you do everything the four of us do as one person. And I have to ask you, like, how do you get the final say, like which
I mean,
Sarah gets the final say on like when you're about to release the episode? I'm
Thank you
just
for
really curious.
asking that. Oh my gosh. It's so funny. And you talk about the different Sarahs because there are. And actually I had a beautiful conversation with Marguerite Croft about this.
Oh yeah, she's awesome.
Oh my gosh, I freaking love her. She was saying, as one creator, we are at times, idea person, we are writer, we are editor, and we are marketer. And it's because you're constantly putting on those different hats. And I don't always know that the right Sarah makes the right decision. And like part of my creative journey has been making my peace, yes, with cutting my darlings, killing my darlings, cutting out things that I realize don't work, but also realizing that I don't always realize what works at the time that I'm doing it. And it is hard to create in a vacuum. And so I've really had to open up as a creator. And my beautiful husband and partner, Tim, I've, shown him drafts and he's like, yep, no, this works, this doesn't, this works, this doesn't. And I think that you really can't get away from that. I think that you really do need other eyes and ears on your work to kind of help you make those decisions.
I think so. I think that gets to the best if it's someone you trust.
Yes, yes. And that's
I hope you trust Tim. Right?
Yeah, that trust is beautiful. And I think that opens up another really interesting question. I know that at least you and Dan and maybe Erik, you and some of the others have all been friends for a long time. But what about people who are just now thinking about starting a project and building a team and they maybe don't have their like childhood best friend to like do this with them? Would you have any advice, I guess, for forming that team? And I know you recently hired some writers, so that might provide some insight as well. And I also want to highlight before I let you speak again, because I'm very rude. You had mentioned checking your ego at the door, and I would love to hear more elaboration on that as well.
So, in terms of working with other people, I think when we decided we want to reach out to more writers because, just simply we need we don't have enough time to do everything we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
We're always trying to do more and more. And we made a decision that we really wanted to work with people who we knew, at least in some capacity. We've been lucky enough to be able to go to podcast conventions, and over the years, maybe a little bit less so with COVID, but to really get to know people in the community whose voices we respect and who we think have talent in writing. So that was our first idea. So I would say, to someone just starting out, don't live on an island. Don't, seclude yourself and meet other people, because, you might not realize like your writing partner is just someone you just met. The other thing I would say is do your research, listen to a lot of shows, see, if possible, read the transcripts, because sometimes the transcript isn't the same thing that you see on the show. I know for Marsfall, we always have an element of collaboration that we really love when our actors offer, insight on their characters. Sometimes that the direction comes back like, no, it's got to be this way because XYZ. But other times we're like, this is brilliant. We didn't think of that. Oh my God, you've got to keep this, and I think that's part of the thing, so I would say like follow the joy and do the research in terms of building your team.
Yeah. And I think once you have done all that and you start to work with people, I think gauge how they best can bring your idea to life. So, I don't talk to every actor the same way, some of them I really chew them out. No, like I'm nice.
Yeah, right.
I'm nice to all of them, of course, when I'm in director mode, and Dan directs as well. So I think he knows where I'm going with this, but it's like different people learn different ways. Different people respond to different kinds of suggestions. And I think unless you're doing it totally solo, like early girl in space style, like where it's one person doing everything, but like even if you have one other actor and you're just the writer producer still, listen to that actor. I'm assuming you're working with them because like you like them and you're working with them and you're building this new trust. And but in the end, you got to have a core clear vision for what you want, because of like what Dan said. Like, yeah, a lot of our actors will improvise and lots of times it's good, but other times it's like, nope, we really need you to say the thing. Like,
That's
And
such a good point. Oh, sorry.
yeah, no. I was just gonna say like one hilarious thing about trust too. So Dan and I have been friends. Sam got hooked into our friend duo became a trio, and then we were 5 episodes into writing the first season of Marsfall, and Sam was like, "Yeah, we'll just record things on our iPhone, and like it'll be fine. It'll all mix together." And then we learned like well, that ain't gonna work, so we had to find an engineer. And when I met Brian, came as a recommendation from someone else. I went in and met him and Owen, who does all of our sound effects. So I met the two of them together. Masterminded all that in VR too. But anyway, not to get sidetracked, I had like a 45-minute kind of interview meeting with them, and then we were like, yeah, let's work together. And I walked away, and I get on the train to go back home in New York City, and I'm like, I've never actually seen or heard anything that they worked on. It just like really vibes with these guys in this fancy studio that they worked at. And like I hope their stuff sounds good. And when I got above ground from the subway, I had an email from Brian that was like, yeah, so excited to like work with you, but we realized like we haven't read any of your scripts, like so there is something I think where like we knew in our heart of hearts like these are people I want to work with. And then luckily I was like, yeah, here's the script, and then an hour later I got an email from him being like, this is great, so excited to do it. And like I went on their website and I was like, yeah, I listened to some of your commercial works, like, oh, sound design is gonna be great. So
That's a
that
relief.
we didn't do enough
Yeah.
research or like, but I think there is something to say that like skill is one thing, but even more important is like knowing that you're going to work together well, and like that's something you can't really quantify
Potentially for years.
Yeah.
Right.
So you don't want to get sick of them.
Yeah, and even if you are just doing a 3-month limited series or something, like 6 episodes, or anthology style with all sorts of different actors, like you want to just make sure that time is fun and there's like comfort and trust there, because then it's going to be so much more efficient, and you're going to get performances and end results that you can't get it any other way.
Just to speak to checking your ego at the door.
Yeah.
This is something that's not difficult for me at all. I mean, as an actor, like rejection is just a very natural part of the process. So that that's really something I've been dealing with since a teenager. And sometimes I get a part and it's great, and the vast majority of the time, most of the things either I'm not right for, or maybe I'm too tall, or whatever it is. But I just have maybe become a bit used to it. But I think anyone working in a creative field kind of has to be okay with the fact that to a certain extent there is some judgment, and you have to be okay with the fact that people are going to judge what you have to offer. It's not always the easiest thing, and it's not always the most comfortable thing.
I mean, that's why I snort laughed when Dan said it was easy for him, because like it ain't easy for me. And I've learned it's a skill. I cultivated it, and now it's a lot easier.
That's a good point, though, too, is that you have to learn a lot of these things as you go.
Yeah. I feel like we still are. I mean, we've been doing this since 2017 we started making Marsfall, and that seems like so long ago now, but I feel like we've learned an incredible amount that we never took classes on, and we never we just learned by kind of fumbling through it and figuring it out ourselves, what worked, what really didn't. And
we like went to grad school on our own, kind of, and it was
Yeah.
way cheaper and way more rewarding.
Yeah.
Well, same. Like everything I've done, I feel like has been just me experimenting along the way. For both of you, or each of you, what has been like the biggest surprise that you've kind of taken away from this process?
That's a good question.
If there's just one, maybe there's like 10,000.
I know, it's like, you want a big one or you want a little one? Like you said, what was the big surprise? Right?
I guess, yeah. Let's go with big.
I think like as we've grown and have been looking to the future, like what's beyond Marsfall, especially a lot in the recent days, because like we are trying to wind down the story. But as we've expanded, one of the reasons we got that writer's room is because we had joined up with a network, the Curious Cast network, and they wanted more episodes. So like that's why we had to kind of, in fact, they wanted a whole nother season than we were originally planning. Like we were going to be like 6 episodes and done with the final season of Marsfall, but they're like, no, we want 2 seasons at 15 a pop.
Okay.
We're like, okay, this is like how
so to go from 6 to 30 is
yeah. And we realized, I think we bit off way more than we could chew, and but it's been a really big experiment. And so I guess the point of that is like the surprise was that as you get bigger, as more people get involved, you're going to be thrown these like really wild curveballs that are going to
Mm.
push you to have to learn another skill. And so I think
Mm.
that can be surprising and can come with a lot of resistance. But if
Mm.
you're checking your ego, and if you're like hopefully given enough time and space to like, you know, not develop a health condition while trying to learn the new skill, yeah, I think you can handle any big surprises like that. I don't know, Dan, if you have like a
Well,
specific
kind of
example.
going along with that, I think for me the biggest surprise was that when we started, I considered myself an actor. I didn't write.
Mm.
I didn't have anything to do with writing the first 4 episodes of Marsfall, and
Mm.
then I decided. We kind of talked about it, and to take a little bit off your plate, Eric, I wanted to.
I begged him. I was like, please, write with me.
Well, I'd written things since high school and college, but I'd never done anything with them because I was so afraid that someone would say it's garbage,
Oh,
or not love it the same way I do. And I found that I had the ability to write and to be okay with it, being out there in the public, and that kind of feeling also translated a little bit to directing. That it was something that
Mm.
I was very nervous doing, just because I feel like I don't know. I have a lot of acting training, but I feel as though that's very me focused. It's all about like my character and figuring out how he fits into the greater story. And who am I to say I understand every single character in a story, as
Mm.
well as the
Mm.
actor. So that was hard for me to take on that role in certain places because it felt I don't know. I've been hearing a lot about imposter syndrome lately, but I felt like that was something that I'm not a director. I'm just an actor and kind of a writer. But that translated to okay, I'm doing this. I'm writing, and now directing more often kind of makes me a writer. Kind of makes me a director. I feel a lot more comfortable wearing those hats, whereas before it was kind of terrifying, and it's very
Mm.
liberating now.
What helped ease you into that? Was it just the act of just moving forward with it and just jumping in and doing it?
I think a little bit, yeah. I mean, I've always loved writing, and it was just kind of yeah, it was a bit of a leap that I had to take. But personally, I've always kind of enjoyed doing something that I'm a little bit afraid of.
Mm.
You
Mhm.
know that feeling you get when you write an email to like a boss or like someone, and it's kind of long, and it's sort of you've like read it 3 times. I don't know, maybe it's masochistic of me. I really love just that sense of like clicking send and like it's out of my hands. I can't do anything about it. Now it's in the universe. I guess because I feel like leading up to that, it's just so like, oh, is it good enough? I don't know. And then
Mm.
just being okay with whatever it is and putting it out there. I found that people are so kind and friendly and forgiving, and
Mm.
that it's much less intimidating than I thought it was, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah. I think
Wow.
I really like that too, Dan, at the very end you said, because I think to remind, kind of circling back to any new people entering this, like the reviews you'll get from the loudest people are the people that like hate your stuff. And I catch this with
Mhm.
myself. I don't write bad reviews to people, but there are so many things that I like that I don't take the time to write a review being
Mm,
like, I like it. And so you
Mm.
always have to keep in mind that the majority of people will be neutral to indifferent toward your work. Then, a lot of people are not going to like it. And then like 10% are going to be like really into it. But like you're doing it for yourself in your core, and like the reward that you're giving to, the people who like it and the indifference. And heck, I would rather have a bigger chunk of people that didn't like it than were indifferent
yeah.
to it. So I'm like, good, it made you
Someone
feel
felt
something.
something based on your art. They
Yeah.
listened. They don't
Yeah.
I
like it,
love
but
that.
okay, that's
Yeah.
their prerogative.
And I could say your critique is invalid, sir.
I mean, when you're
I'm gonna
producing
start
art for
using that.
free, it's like you kind of
Yeah.
can leave some criticism, like at the door. It's like you can criticize
Mm.
Yeah.
all you want, but I'm making this for you. You don't have to pay anything. So,
Yeah. And I know I've even texted you, Sarah, I think a couple of years ago when I got a review that was like really negative to the writing specifically. And it was the first one that kind of cut through. And it
Mm.
kind of taught me that like you can't put up walls and like put up a shell, because like it will break at some point, and that break like really
Mm.
hurts. So I think it's just like you're rolling with it like the tide. It's just like the waves, and
Mm.
like, sometimes you ride the wave, sometimes the wave smashes you in the sand. But
yeah.
like still the ocean. It's a beautiful like process to be like giving to something and having like feedback come in, and just knowing that it's out there shared with people.
Yeah. Sorry, you're I'm thinking back to all of the, the 1-star reviews and feeling like, the ocean wave has just smashed your face into the sand.
Yeah.
But, at the same time, you're an incredibly good and valid and wonderful writer and creator, and nobody gets to take that away
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
you.
And you're
Yeah.
learning. You're all constantly
Yeah.
learning.
Oh my gosh.
You
Yeah.
know, it's so easy to critique, but to
Mhm.
produce, to make something is so much harder, and it takes so much more vulnerability and courage that, you
Yeah.
know, I find myself very often, if I'm going to critique like a movie or a show, I want to look at not just like, was I entertained from, start to finish, but how much work went into this? And,
Yeah.
is it something that took a lot of effort to make? And if so, that's valid. It might
Mhm.
not be my favorite thing, but maybe I don't need to be rude about it on the internet also.
Yeah. And even like with a
Yes.
bad movie, like I might be like, shame on you, writer or director. But like in the end, I'm like, at least a bunch of people got paid to make this.
Yeah.
Like, so
People.
they're like, yeah, I'm like, hooray for the crew workers and the
Mhm.
editors, and hopefully all getting their union rates.
I hope so.
Yeah.
My gosh, I have like 10 billion questions to ask you, but I also want and need to be respectful of your time.
Sure.
Okay, but I do want to touch on a few more things. I
Sure.
know that earlier when I asked, like, oh, who has the final say on what works and what doesn't, you talked a little bit about your overall vision for the show. Where does that vision come from, and how do you stay true to it? Do you have it documented somewhere? And what does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's quite a process. We use Google Drive, and I think Google Drive is as good as you can use it. So like we've just found a way to use it really well. It started off, it was my nugget of an idea, and then Sam and I were riffing on it during our lunch breaks at our hellish office job. And like, and by hellish, I just mean really boring. Like, but
One kind of hell.
yeah, exactly, yeah. And then we roped Dan in pretty quick, and now that like Brian has gotten more involved on the story level with the latest season, that documentation is critical to. We're texting all the time, emailing, leaving comments on docs and stuff. But I think at this stage, when we're going with the story, we all get the freedom to throw out ideas and make a case for why something is important, and that might not gel with one or two or even all three of other people. But I think it's about, making your case. And I think if any one of us have really thought it through, we're passionate about it, that like the rest of us are going to roll with it until it works or it doesn't work.
Mhm.
And it's just kind of like the killing the darlings thing a little bit again too. I mean, even the ideas at the very, very basic level of just shouting stuff into the void and seeing, what sticks on the page, you have to like kind of bring that mentality too when working with a group of people. Because going back to earlier, like I'm a fairly bossy person, so I like to direct, and and I think because of that, I have skills that like help me be a showrunner. But it's like I don't boss the three of them around. Like we have to really be equal to each other and just always ask the question, like, is it good for the story? Is it good for the characters? And hopefully someone will write it down.
Yeah. I'd say like any new projects, things we've been working on outside of Marsfall, and really
Mhm.
new seasons and episodes of Marsfall in later days, we've really tried to look at much bigger overarching questions, things that have to do with, like, how can this apply to humanity at large? How can, like, is this
Yeah.
something that is really only specific to this one character in this one show, or is this a question that can be applied to any audience member listening? And it's not always going to be everybody, but I think there are a lot of I'm a teacher, so this is what I would call an essential question,
Ooh.
where it's like, a rhetorical question that's not necessarily going to be answered, but it's kind of like the overall thing for this unit. For the next 3 months, we're focusing on answering this question by doing 1,000 things. So yeah, it's more metaphysical and more big picture. But if we can't answer that, then we need to go back and figure out, okay, then what are we really trying to say? Is it just like we think it's fun to be on Mars? Okay, that's cool, but that doesn't really necessarily.
What's the why?
Yeah, why
Yeah.
are we here?
Yeah.
What are we really trying to say about the future of people and interactions with people and space and AI and all sorts of stuff?
And tapping into your core beliefs, whether you're an individual or a team of
Mm.
4 or more, I think like if it's not gelling with your core beliefs, you're not going to be able to write something and fully create it
Yeah, the passion won't
from
be
the
there.
heart. Yeah, you need that passion.
Mhm.
Boy, I agree with that. And I kind of I wanted to ask some questions about like, oh, so, when a network comes in and says, hey, we need you to do this thing that you didn't plan on, but I also don't want you to throw the network under the bus.
No.
And so I don't know if there's like a gentle way you can talk about what that felt like and what that is like.
I mean, we would never throw anyone. They're not worthy of being thrown under the bus. I think like when you start working with someone that's like a network, we also have a manager that we've started working with the last year and a half. Basically, someone from the outside that's more the business.
Mm.
I think you go in with expectations, and you just have to be flexible with expectations. Like we've had to work with our network about adjusting some deadlines to get them the quantity they want at the quality we want to deliver.
Yeah.
And they 100% were like, yeah, guys, let's delay, the release a little bit if you want to do these rewrites. Like we respect the art. And I just really like that hit me hard. Like, I expect my actors, like, our writers, like obviously my producing partners to say that, but like for the network to do that, the team over at Curious Cast has just been really accommodating.
I love that.
Yeah. And like for us, the four of us at Marsfall, like our long-term goals, it's not just to make Marsfall. We want to make other things, and hopefully 2022 is going to be a big year from us, like making that dream a bigger reality. And I think like to do that, we're going to have to learn how to play nice with the money that's out there, with the distribution.
Without compromising our values.
Without compromising the values. Yeah. And this is by no means to say that someone starting out needs a network or needs, major financial backing or needs a manager. We didn't have any of that. We did it. So it's just, we're trying out different things. And this is what we're committing to, because in the end, we always are deciding our company vision is like, we're going to gamble on the four of us. No one else. So like, what's the best gamble for us? Because the one thing we know is that we can make good art. Not to sound arrogant.
No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I almost kind of want that to be like our closing sentiment here.
Cool.
My gosh. Okay. I want to ask one final question out of my list that has continued to grow during our conversation. But you mentioned like, hey, if you're just getting started, you maybe don't need a manager and all of that. What would you say getting started and telling a collaborative story? What is it that you just need at the very most basic?
Definitely a vision. And if you're working with other people, a shared vision about what you want to say. If you have a message, what is that message specifically? Not like, I want to talk about friendship. Okay, but what are you saying about friendship?
Yeah.
Again, this is like me being a teacher. It's like, it's not a theme statement. It's just a word. You need a whole sentence. But really, like, what are you saying? If you have a voice, so use it to say something that you believe in. And I think in creating a show, if it's a podcast with, I don't know, 10 episodes per season, you have that much time to be able to say X about what you believe. And if you have another season, great. But it's really important to know what you want to communicate with the world. And I think it's important to realize that you might be saying something sort of similar to someone else, but that doesn't mean what you have to say is invalid. Yeah. It's your perspective, so you're bringing a new light on it. Unless you're literally doing a shot for shot or remake or take for take remake in audio. And even then, that's still got your own vision to it. So I think it's so important to know what you want to say. And if you're not sure what you want to say, figure it out. Like, have brainstorming sessions, talk to people and journal, write down things that you feel. And if that changes, note that and see where it's going. If you can kind of find a trajectory, that can help to sort of give you a better idea of what you want your show to be.
I love it.
In like very broad terms, I kind of say it as half joke, but like there's only a handful of stories. So I think a lot of people too can be intimidated of like, oh, I'm just doing the same story. Well, it's okay. Like if you're listening to this right now and you're like, I have this great story about these colonists that go to Mars and they have an AI, but like Marsfall did it. Like I guarantee you on my bookshelf, your Netflix queue, my Netflix queue, we have the same things in there. We're drawing from the same resources. But like, what do you want to tell about those colonists and their machine? And like, that's what gets at the core of it. The structure of like following story beats, of making like cool characters, like that's all templates. But like when you bring your unique flavor to it and commit to that, that's going to make it special for you and for a lot of your listeners.
I love it. Both of you, Erik, Dan, Thank you for being here. Every time I talk with you, I'm just so happy. I learn a little bit. I laugh a little bit. It's just such a good time. And I just appreciate both of you so much. Where can people find you online? Where can they listen to your shows and just see more of what you're up to?
Sure. I'd say the one-stop shop is marsfallpodcast.com. You can find all of our episodes there. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at marsfallpod. And you can find Marsfall. We have 3 seasons out right now and a couple miniseries all on our main RSS feed. So you can find us by looking up Marsfall. And we do have a Patreon that has some behind-the-scenes content, interviews, a lot of music talks from Sam. You can also get the entire music soundtrack. I can't believe we didn't even get into music, because music and writing. But yeah, so you can also find Marsfall on Patreon by going to Patreon and searching for Marsfall. Did I say Marsfall enough times?
Marsfall.
Thank you.
No, I just want to thank you both for being here, for sharing your knowledge and your expertise. One of my favorite things is when other creators are so generous with what they've learned. And I know it takes a lot. It takes a lot of experimentation and risk taking and just personal time and energy to move forward and to create. And you have done that so beautifully. And I really appreciate you sharing that with our listeners today. So links to, links to Marsfall will be in the show notes for today's episode. So if you want to find those show notes, they're out at sarahwerner.com, and then just go on to this latest episode. And gosh, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Thank you for being here. And I'm just delighted that we got to talk with you today.
Thank you so much. This is a blast.
Yeah, it really was. So good to see you, Sarah.